Okay, so today we get to talk about breastfeeding and how it relates to infant sleep. Two topics that you have a lot of expertise about, primarily and probably most extensively your breastfeeding experience, but also you have some expertise in infant sleep too. So can you just kind of mention a little bit about your experience there, your background, and what makes you an expert on this topic?
Sure. I have been an IBCLC for 13 or 14 years. So definitely a lot of, I've seen tens of thousands of families in that avenue. And then my infant sleep is a new venture for me, but about a year ago, I was certified as a baby-led sleep specialist through Isla Grace. And got a lot of really wonderful education through that.
Okay. And these things, I imagine, like you've told me before, you pursued the sleep certification because, I mean, it's all wrapped up together with breastfeeding, right? So you're helping families with breastfeeding, but then there's so much to know related to sleep and breastfeeding as well. So you wanted to know more, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what this is about today. How does breastfeeding affect sleep, infant sleep, your sleep even as a parent, and vice versa? How the way a baby sleeps affects breastfeeding. So can you kind of touch on that?
Yeah. So what's normal for newborns during, those early months is that they will be waking every 2 to 3 hours, which is in perfect alignment with how much we need to be removing milk in order for our body to build and establish a good milk supply. So ideally, we'll be nursing every 2 to 3 hours around the clock in order to have some really good milk removal to tell your body how much milk to produce. The first 4 weeks are the most critical for really building and establishing that good milk supply. So having, having frequent milk removal is critical. But babies by design wake every 2 to 3 hours. So you and baby are in perfect alignment with your body's needs and their sleep needs.
Okay. So it's kind of designed to work together.
Exactly.
Good. And so what else about breastfeeding related to sleep? Can breastfeeding provide any extra benefit or protection for sleep?
Yeah, so I will say that we release hormones that make both us and our baby sleepy, as at night especially. And so it does help baby to get some good, 3-hour chunks of sleep overnight. We just have a hormonal response that, again, make both us and the baby sleepy. Yeah. So,
Okay. Prolactin, right? I think you said that.
well, prolactin is the milk-making hormone, but how that relates is we release prolactin between the hours of 1 and 5 a.m., and that's our milk-making hormone. So we kind of count on some sort of milk removal happening during that time as a way to kind of ramp up that milk volume.
Okay. So there's that and other hormones that help.
Yeah, tryptophan, and there are things that really make us sleepy at night and by design. Breastfed babies on average get about 45 minutes more sleep than their formula feeding counterparts. So that's definitely a plus.
Okay.
I will say too that there is a 73% SIDS reduction for families or babies that are exclusively breastfed as well. And even if you breastfeed your baby one time and you never breastfeed again, you reduce the risk of SIDS by about 65%. So your breast milk is incredibly important for protecting babies from SIDS.
Wow. I didn't know that statistic. That's big. Even just one time.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So what are some other maybe benefits to breastfeeding related to sleep, just like logistically?
Having baby close, I think definitely helps, because then when baby wakes up, you literally just grab them, latch them on, feed, and then put them right back. And so you don't have to get out of bed. That is always my biggest thing with bottle feeding is I love sleep. So the idea for me of having to get up in the middle of the night, go to the kitchen, get a bottle, boil water, prepare the formula. We still haven't even fed the baby yet. Then we feed the baby, take the bottle back to the kitchen. it just becomes this whole production. Whereas with breastfeeding, you literally just grab the baby, latch them on, put them back, done.
Yeah.
So
You
so
don't have
much
to
easier.
do dishes in the middle of the night.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I imagine that contributes to getting a little more sleep too for you and
Exactly.
maybe baby too.
Exactly.
Okay. Um, so what about though the idea of giving your baby, like topping them off with a big full bottle, whether that's pumped breast milk or formula or whatever? But I hear that sometimes, right? Like, well, I try to give my baby a big bottle full, fill their bellies to get a better stretch of sleep at night. Like, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I genuinely understand why we might want to do that or why we might feel called to do that. And it really comes from a place of just desperation of like wanting to get more sleep. And so I have nothing but empathy for that. But the reality around that is that babies are really designed to be waking every 3 hours. It really is a protective measure against SIDS. I wouldn't encourage, letting babies sleep through the night in those early weeks or months. Like I would really want to follow their natural rhythms of that every 3 hours. So while that might be true that the baby might sleep a longer stretch, that isn't necessarily what's best for them or for your milk volume, honestly. So no one really benefits from it in reality.
Okay, that makes sense. And how about over time? You said they wake every 2 to 3 hours to sleep. That's good. That's normal. That's natural. It's building the milk supply. It's keeping the babies safe. But how about as the babies start to grow out of that newborn phase? How will that change when you're still breastfeeding?
Yeah, so it just happens slowly and incrementally over time. Like babies will start to sleep these longer stretches. Once babies are 2 weeks old, ideally they'll be back to birth weight. All babies lose weight, but at 2 weeks, we should see them back to that birth weight. And then we don't have to wake them anymore. But I suspect they'll still be waking every like 3 to 4 hours. But as the weeks and months continue, we'll start to get these good 4 to 5 hour stretches of sleep. And it happens slowly over time. So our body has time to adjust based on what the baby's needs are.
Okay. So it's not necessarily true that your milk supply will suffer once the babies start to sleep a little longer because it's so gradual.
Right. And babies are just so much more efficient. As they get older, they're better at removing the milk. And so they might on their own take a larger volume and be able to go these longer stretches.
Okay. Yeah, so something to look forward to.
Yeah. And I want to add too that like over time, you're going to see that baby sleeps these longer stretches. And then if all of a sudden they start waking up again often, sometimes moms worry like, oh my gosh, like we were doing so good and now we're going backwards. Like what's happening? But really babies have a hard time sleeping through growth spurts. So if they're hitting this big developmental, growth, it can be challenging for them to sleep. Like if they're getting ready to roll over, for example, they're just so excited about this cool thing that they're about to do that sleep becomes challenging. They're like, did you see this cool thing I almost did? And then they master that skill and then they go back to sleeping the longer stretches. So if your baby is waking a bit more frequently after sleeping longer stretches, trust the process, know that it's normal and very temporary.
Yeah, I remember that. That was frustrating sometimes, but it's good to know that's normal.
Absolutely.
Okay. Great. How about any tips? Any tips related to breastfeeding and your baby's sleep?
I think feeding on demand or just feeding as often as baby wants to is really the most important thing. So just cue-based feeds, following your baby's lead. And then again, pulling in support, really making sure that we have someone to support us so that we can get sleep during the day while our babies are also sleeping.
Yeah, so not necessarily asking someone else to feed your baby, but asking someone else to do other things for you so you can sleep when your baby sleeps and continue to feed them on demand. Yeah,
exactly. Have somebody else do the dishes so that you can take a nap.
okay. And something else I know a lot of people wonder about is like how what we eat or drink might impact our breast milk and could anything that we like caffeine, if I drink a lot of coffee, is that going to keep my baby awake? So things like that. Any tips there?
Sure. I encourage start small with caffeine. I think having, 1, 2 cups of coffee in the morning, if you do that and baby seems fine, well then great. Worst thing that could happen is that baby has a hard time napping that day. And then you know that you overdid it and just to not do that again. But typically babies don't have a problem with, us having coffee in the morning. We would consider excessive amounts of caffeine to be between 700 to 800 milligrams, which is quite a lot. So I think as long as we stay in that like 1 to 2 cups of coffee in the morning range, even 3 cups would be okay.
Okay.
Anything other like food wise, like I don't put any emphasis on that at all. Eat to hunger, drink to thirst.
Okay. So there's not all that much that you eat or drink that really is going to have a big impact on your milk that could affect your baby.
Yeah, it's incredibly rare and way overly diagnosed. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The body is amazing. The milk making mechanism is amazing, right? How it filters just what the baby needs and leaves out the stuff the baby doesn't need. And sometimes we don't give enough credit there, I think.
Exactly.
Okay. Any warning signs that maybe something is wrong and that you might want to get checked into?
Yeah, I think if baby was truly waking up every hour, if we were never getting periods of rest where we were seeing some good 2 to 3 hour chunks of time, baby was waking up every hour, there lots of crying, arching the back, if they seem like there's something going on like here where they're kind of elongating the neck often or arching their back, it would be worth checking in with your pediatrician just to kind of rule out any like reflux or any GI upsets. But we should see some good 2 to 3 hour chunks of sleep. And if we're not seeing that, that's when I would check in.
Okay. All right. It's great. Thank you so much, Cassie. Good
Yeah,
information.
thank you.